There was a time when the lakes of Africa whispered only to those who listened. Before the bureaucrats, the fish farms, and the plastic nets, Lake Victoria and Lake Kivu thrummed with an ancient rhythm. A mosaic of life formed over millennia. Fishermen told stories of fish with colored bones, of deep-water species that never surfaced, and of waters that dreamed in silence. Lake Victoria, the world's largest tropical lake, was a hotspot of evolutionary experimentation. It held more than 500 species of cichlids alone, a dazzling array of ecological specialists. Some nibbled algae from rocks, others sifted through sediment for tiny invertebrates, and a few were predators of other fish. These species had evolved over just 15,000 years, a blink in geological time, after the lake last dried out. The result was one of the most diverse vertebrate radiations on Earth. These species functioned like gears in a finely tuned machine. Together, they regulated algae, kept plankton levels balanced, and facilitated nutrient recycling. When one species faltered, others adjusted to compensate, maintaining equilibrium. Oxygen levels stayed consistent due to natural mixing and microbial activity, and water clarity supported robust primary production. Lake Kivu, in contrast, had fewer species but an equally fascinating ecology. It is one of only 3 known meromictic lakes in the world, meaning its layers never fully mix. The lower layers, saturated with methane and carbon dioxide, are lethal to life but are held in place by a dense stratification that protects the oxygenated upper waters. The fish community in Kivu had evolved to occupy a narrow ecological band, adapted to high-altitude tropical conditions and volcanic substrates. These lakes were not empty canvases. They were living tapestries, and every thread served a purpose. After World War II, a wave of development theory swept across Africa. With the promise of food security and economic modernization, scientists and policymakers looked to aquatic ecosystems as potential fish factories. To many, Lake Victoria appeared underutilized, vast but inefficient. The Nile perch, Lates niloticus, became the centerpiece of this vision. Native to the Nile and certain other river systems, it could reach over 2 meters in length and weigh up to 200 kilograms. Its growth rate and value on international markets made it an ideal candidate. Alongside it came several tilapia species, chosen for their adaptability, hardiness, and rapid reproduction. Introductions were done piecemeal, some clandestinely. Historical records suggest that Nile perch was illegally introduced to Lake Victoria as early as 1954, despite objections from local scientists. The rationale was simple: boost protein production and stimulate commercial fisheries. But ecological foresight was lacking. Victoria's cichlids had never faced a predator like Nile perch. The tilapias competed for breeding sites and food with native species. The invaders were not just newcomers. They were disruptors of ancient networks. Subtle changes appeared within a decade. The water grew greener. Some cichlids disappeared from specific regions. The productivity rose on paper, but the foundations beneath it began to erode. By the 1980s, the scale of transformation in Lake Victoria was undeniable. Nile perch populations surged. By biomass, they soon made up more than 60% of all fish in the lake. At first, the catches were astounding. Nets pulled in tons of massive fish. But underneath this commercial success lay ecological devastation. Entire cichlid species went extinct. Estimates range from 200 to 300 lost species. This was one of the most rapid vertebrate extinction events in recorded history. Many species vanished before they were scientifically described. The consequences cascaded. With fewer algae-grazing fish, phytoplankton exploded. Cyanobacteria bloomed, turning once clear water into soupy green. Water clarity fell by over 50% in some regions. Decomposition of excess organic matter led to hypolimnetic anoxia, particularly in deeper areas. These oxygen-depleted zones expanded seasonally, trapping fish in shallower waters and causing large-scale mortality during turnover events. Meanwhile, human activity intensified the stress. Fertilizer runoff from expanding agriculture, deforestation in the watershed, and urban waste amplified nutrient loading. The natural resilience of the lake's ecosystem had been gutted. Fishing communities found themselves paradoxically trapped, reliant on a single species, vulnerable to market shocks, and surrounded by a lake that no longer supported the web of life that once sustained them.